It is now time to look back into the history of advertising and the several milestones it reached for the last 3 centuries. Session 5's speaker is an assistant professor at the Human Sciences Faculty of the Portuguese Catholic University here in Lisbon. Good afternoon and welcome, Professor Eduardo Cintra Torres.
The history of advertising. These reflections are the result of researching and writing a first history of advertising in Portugal, a commission by Fundação Amélia de Melo, and one of the works that will mark the 150th anniversary of the birth of Alfredo da Silva. And this research will give a special attention to CUF from the 1850s to the present. This is the first ever advertising published in Portugal in paper. So the first one in 1715 in the only newspaper that existed in the country at the time. We are not going to read it, but just look at the mass of words. And I would call the attention for these words here. The method, very easy to teach. This is a professor coming to Lisbon. And so already some adjectives and some the beginning of the advertising language at the time. I think that sometimes people forget that with the Industrial Revolution, we had also a commercial revolution and a communications revolution. This is a big mix, and in the case of advertising, it is the result of those 3 revolutions. The media now were flourishing, newspapers, there were leaflets and posters since the beginning, and the freedoms in capitalist societies allowed for this flourishing of advertising. As you can see in the press, the advertising was words, words, words. As you can see in this newspaper from 1838, this was free, it was distributed in Lisbon and also in other places. This newspaper, and it had no images, and it was only about words. But we should not be misled by this. This mass of words also seen in this page of Diário de Notícias in 1914. You can see it had 642 ads, classified ads, and this was the newspaper couldn't be more proud than with this page that they reproduced some years later in a book commemorating the newspaper. But we cannot forget that the newspapers also had another kind of ads. Even if they had no illustrations, they had some, arrangement of the words in a way that would be more nice and attractive. And this ad of CUF in 1904 is an example of that. But there were also, since probably the Middle Ages, some commercial, I wouldn't call it advertising, but promotion, commercial promotion that used images. And this was very present in shop signs. I have found some shop signs, not the originals, of course, but reproductions of those shop signs. You can see in this book from 1806, and the left a furniture shop used for some reason that I cannot explain, a card, a playing card, and on the right you can see a shoemaker who used in one side of his shop, he put the drawing of a boot, and he said underneath, so for those who could not understand, this is boot, or this is a boot, and on the other side of the shop, this is shoe, or this is a shoe. Okay, so this is important because I think that we have in the history of advertising, this has been in a way forgotten, that a lot of advertising with illustrations was present in the streets of the big cities or the larger cities, in the signs of shops. And later it became very important. Also, these kinds of signs, because they could not have a lot of words, used a new kind of advertising. And this was slogans, signatures, repetitions of words, rhymes, humor, and even foreign languages, which is something that we see nowadays everywhere. English is everywhere in Portuguese advertising. But you can see here at least nice nice slogans in shops. One of them, it's wonderful. Café feito de café, coffee made of coffee. Isn't it nice? Nice. I would go there and drink something. A house of pleasure and happiness. This was about what? Wine. You could go there and drink wine. The other one said house of eating fashionably. And this one, the fourth says, he or she who does not come in doesn't know. I think this is wonderful, wonderful way of attracting people. And finally, this one, also for drinking, feminine liquors, which is very attractive. Maybe it was wrong. They wanted to say liquors for ladies, but they wrote feminine liquors. So this has been forgotten, this dimension. Also, another thing is that we now have advertising everywhere, but this came from also the 19th century, when those three revolutions came together. Let's see some examples very quickly. Brochures. I love this brochure from 1926. It says, "Don't read, non leia," and there is this arrow inviting you to read. Circulars, also kind of marketing at the beginning of marketing. This one is a circular signed by Alfredo da Silva, and by promoting the CUF products. Also leaflets to be distributed from the same time, also from CUF, a nice a nice leaflet. A foldaway promoting a very well-known soap by CUF, activated a soap, CUF. Catalogues was very, very common during at least 1 century. This is from the Industrial Exposition in the island of São Miguel in 1901, with a Art Nouveau painting or illustration and the symbol of CUF here, very early in time, 1901. Also signs, they were everywhere. I chose this one because it's outside Lisbon, also in smaller cities like Guimarães in the north of Portugal. You can see those two signs here, one the English Royal Mail and the other one for a sewing machines shop. Painted signs in walls. This comes probably from the Middle Ages, and you can see here in the warehouse of CUF outside Lisbon, and also with a sign of the CUF insurance company. Roofs, another place to put ads everywhere. Also electric signs in roofs and walls. Fences, fans for ladies in theaters. Fireplates on buildings, very old. This is one you can see also, not only the plate, but also the drawing that originated this plate, which is in one archive of this company. Also brands and registered brands, they're totally connected with the advertising. Advertising invited for companies to create brands, and brands needed advertising. So you can see here the very old signs of two CUF factories, and they say registered in these signs that were at the entrance. Here you have labels, also used as advertising. Labels, in this case, for candles made by CUF in the beginning of the last century. This one is also from CUF, also candle boxes. But what is nice here is that you can see that it's kind of multimedia, isn't it? You can see the same drawing, more or less, in a press ad that I found from around 1900. Here also tramway tickets. CUF was involved, at least Alfredo da Silva was involved in the Carris de Ferro company. And so here we have an ad at this very, very little, this is what, 4 centimeters or 5 ad or a ticket of the tramway. Also, even jokes were used to promote and to make advertising in the press, like this one by the famous drawer Vienna in 1957. Also, ceramics, this beautiful plate from 1908 from this very fashionable shop, and this one also a plate, a gift to customers by a very popular shop in Alcântara. Very nice drawing. Tiles. All the country has tiles with advertising in Portugal. Theater and cinema curtains, this one from 1910, more or less. Cinema, the first advertising film made in Portugal in 1917, was also multimedia with an enormous poster, 3 meters high. Here, also another film, this one by Kuf, made more or less in 1931-32. You can see the soon-to-be very famous actor Vasco Santana. He begins in a donkey and finishes with a Rolls Royce because he uses the chemical fertilizers from Kuf. And this was also used, it was also multimedia because also used in posters, the same narrative by every year, 1928, 29, 30, and so on. Posters in the beginning were very with a lot of details. This is a copy I have of a 1903 poster, and the printing proof very colonialist, and they were very progressive. They considered themselves Republicans and very progressive. And you can see here that Africa is occupied by all white people from Germany, Portugal, England, and France and Italy, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so after that period with a lot of detail, posters began to become very scientific and with very little detail. You can see here one made for Vinho do Porto by the very famous Capiello poster creator, and another one, I don't know the author, also with very little detail to be put on the walls. Here some from Kuf, from Tabaqueira, the tobacco company. They had to do a lot of popular and general campaigns, advertising. Probably the first big campaign by Kuf to all kinds of population, including women. This is a very naughty and very machista ad. Have you tasted the big bird of Tabaqueira? Taste it is to adopt it. Also, parades were used to promote companies and brands. You can see here a design by not but I think it's Luís Salvador in 1913 that I found in the Theatre Museum in Lisbon. But I also found the result of this design, which was this car that went in a parade in Lisbon in the same year of 1913. The first football field advertising or advertisement seems to be this one in 1933. You can see those 4 guys are showing the advertisement. Use the Typers soap. Here, this is a poster, but this company put these kinds of signs in deserted roads, and it became very famous because this sign was everywhere in Portugal. So even in empty roads, you could advertise. Also, the air, it's not new. Okay, I put this photograph that everybody knows who goes to the beach here in Portugal, that you may have to listen and watch airplanes. But also in 1909, it was already used in Paris to promote, in this case, a newspaper. Human billboards, we can see still them in some places today. And what else? Why not this giant leg man in Oporto in 1934? Or horses. In Portugal, there was a horse painted blue in around 1900 that was put in Rossio, the main square. But here I couldn't find any photograph or any drawing of that. So here you can see an electric sign a restaurant using a horse with an electric sign in his body. Very strange, but possible. So this activity became structured because it was presented by newspapers and people who needed the money of the advertising as a necessity, and afterwards it was considered as compulsory or mandatory. You had to do advertising. Okay, so this originated agencies at the end of the 19th century. In Portugal, the first one, modern, was made by this man, Raul Caldevilla, in 1914, more or less. It implied that an ethical behavior, because if you have a profession, you need to have an ethical code, let's say, a deontological code, and an ideology. So we can see the birth of this scientific advertising ideology at the end of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. Yeah, so this was kind of practical psychology. You had to know the product, you had to know the targets, and you had to know the best way where to spend the money of the announcers. La science, la réclame. This is a book from 1896. Here I found this in another small museum in Portugal. This is Leal da Câmara, who did a lot of beautiful posters. He was a very good designer. In France he was very famous, in Spain also, and here too. And you can see here the so-called hierarchical models, not called as such, but you can see that the consumer, you can see it below, the consumer is indifferent, then he gets attention, he gets with the ads, he gets interest, the desire to buy, the will to buy, and then he buys or she buys. Okay, so we can see that this was considered scientific, this way of building advertising. Meanwhile, propaganda, which was the name also for advertising, became public relations, since the word propaganda became a kind of bad word in the United States, and after that in Europe. And in a way, public relations PR is also part of marketing, or marketing is part of public relations. And also, of course, I'm skipping a lot of things, especially television, which is the glorious moment of history of advertising, especially for storytelling. Also, this storytelling being used also in the press before the invention of television. Okay, so it's not new. Storytelling is used since the 19th century in advertising. It became more scientific in the United States around 1915 or something, and then it passed to, of course, to the audiovisual, where it is a natural thing to tell stories in those media. Then came the internet, and this is the fourth and probably the most complete revolution we have lived in the last 100 years or more. No, much more important than other political revolutions that we have heard about. Okay, so we have now this tyranny of metrics, as according to this author. I don't know where this is going to lead. Probably there is too much information about consumers. You know better than I, because I'm just researching the history of advertising. But in fact, we know a lot about the consumers. And this seems to be a way of knowing what to say. I'm not sure about it. Maybe people from marketing know better, but companies can communicate directly to their targets. It doesn't mean that they are communicating better with the new kinds of marketing and public relations, but they do know a lot, and they can interact with consumers in a way that it never happened before in the same way. This is, for me, this is the acme of virtual communication. So we had people communicating, but now this has been invented, these virtual digital cartoons, cartoons with the characteristics of people. And instead of real people, we have virtual influencers. And it seems that a lot of people like this. This only means that I'm very old now, because I think this is amazing that people can follow virtual influencers, because the idea of being an influencer was to be a real person. So it's interesting that maybe it's only a fashion. You will know better than I do, but this is really something new that I take very seriously too. Where is art? There was this big discussion during at least half a century, last century, about is advertising a science or an art? It is both, said Leal da Câmara, the man I showed you this conference scheme. But now it seems that it's very difficult to be artistic. You can see that even luxury companies are using less artish elements in their advertising. And you can see very easily in the internet that it's better not to be artist. If you do a very ugly ad, you will have more people clicking, okay? Like in this case, yeah? I don't know if this is true, but it looks like, okay? So it is a paradox. Ugly ads versus pretty ads, and people prefer it seems more people prefer ugly ads. So art is a little bit out of the question now. Will it come back? I don't know. I don't know the future. I know that PR is really taking a large part in all this business of commercial promotion, especially I think because companies can be by themselves in social networks and have their sites. They don't need nobody else's newspaper to promote their products. In any case, some things still are the same. Yeah. The process of adjusting communication to basic human emotions like attention, interest, desire, it's the same. And you should use the same basic persuasive appeals as Aristotle mentioned 25 centuries ago. Ethos, logos, and pathos. This is still around. Also, the use of the mix words, sounds, and images. You need everything, and you need to be everywhere. Okay, so although there is a more informative a return to a more informative way of promoting commercially products and services, you need that, you know, OLX and eBay and so on. Maybe the old kind of advertising is still needed, at least as part of commercial promotion. So it's still around. You could see this, I think, I'm sure everybody or a lot of you have seen a lot of images like this one, this kind of fake ads, yeah? Who knows, maybe made by someone working for the advertising company of McDonald's. But the first picture from Mars, coming from Perseverance and NASA or NASA, was, I could see a lot of these things with the introduction of advertising in Mars. So maybe soon advertising will be also in Mars. I don't know, but in any case, I think that this idea of the impossible dream is still needed, because we are still the same human beings. We haven't changed that. So even the new things have to adapt to the very old human being that has been around for what, 1 million years probably. Thank you very much for your attention.